how do you?
Um, okay, so with so starting with the Exodus, um, why do you think when the plight of the Israelites is described there in Exodus 1, why does if so look it's not that important a question, but it is a head scratcher. Why does Pharaoh want to kill the boys? Why did if you're going to have a slave labor force, why deprive
Why
yourself
kill the
of?
boys?
Pardon?
So right before that, didn't they talk? Didn't the handmaids or the midwives uh, talk about how uh, resilient the women were?
Yeah, that they're very, I think, productive.
Like, yep, that they had already given birth before the maid or the midwife could even get to them.
Yeah.
That struck me that right before that there was this weird thing distinguishing Israelite women from other women.
Yeah.
Not that I mean, it seems like it might have been a cover, but
Yeah. No. So again, it says kill, but even then, it says kill the boys. This is in
right.
this is chapter 1, verse 16. So he tells the what do you call them? The women who
Um,
induced labor.
uh,
I just forgot the word.
Maidservants or handmaidens or
No, like in modern, uh, what are they?
midwives.
Midwives. Thank you. Um, so it tells them to kill the boys, and then they said that they can't do it because they're so quick with the delivery, the Jewish women. But the question is, why kill the boys? Like, why deprive yourself of slave labor? Okay, you'd want more males to do more labor, Okay? And so look, if you want to maintain a labor force, you 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 wouldn't kill the labor the men. The men are the ones who provide the labor. And if you wanted to eliminate this ethnic group, you'd kill the girls, not the boys. Because again, one boy, one male, can impregnate all the women and keep the nation growing. But if there's only one woman left of childbearing age, she can't repopulate the nation, no matter how active she is.
The problem would be then males would the Egyptian women be attracted to the Israelite males?
Right.
And then would the
Well, you mean if they kill
if
the
the
girl?
men were taken out? Oh no!
No, no.
You hear
I
me?
can see it.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yeah. So if the men were taken out, then what?
Then, if they found the Israelite women attractive, then the Egyptian men could take Israelite women as concubines or as wives or what have you.
Yeah,
Not
yeah. So look, the oh, are you?
I
Can
can
you
hear you.
can you say something? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. There's something
Yes.
with the internet. Um, so look, again, assuming he's not an idiot, which let's assume that you don't get to be Pharaoh if you're an idiot. Um, then again, the idea that you would deprive yourself of male labor within your slave population makes no sense. Okay? So, to your point, it might be, maybe the idea is to get the Israelite women to marry outside the group, okay? To marry non-Israelites, so that the Egyptian population will still grow, but this ethnic entity, the Israelites or Hebrews, will dissolve through intermarriage. Okay, so look, the text, like I said, it's not that important, but it's weird. You know, it leads you to kind of wonder what was the program. So and again, the text doesn't explain, but doesn't explain explicitly. But can you see guidance in the text?
Well, there's
what the
emphasis. There seems to be emphasis on that the Israelites are growing at an exponential rate, far faster than the Egyptians,
right.
And it might have something to do with the fertility of the women.
Right, but so what? Okay, so what's the danger of having, look, in most slave societies, if you have a slave population that is growing, that's good. More slaves, more free labor. Okay, so what is, again, if there's, the reason I bring this up is that it brings up the question of what is Pharaoh trying to, what is the concern here?
Okay? That an outside nation will co-opt the slave population into uniting against the Egyptians.
Right. That's the only inkling of explanation of Pharaoh's fear or concern here, and that is verse 10. Let's what's the word? Let's devise a program against these people multiplying, because then they'll be able to be a fifth column, helping a foreign power. Okay, so the idea is that they could become a powerful or a numerous domestic enemy that could join our external enemy in a future war. In which case, you'd be concerned about the men, warriors, rather than the women. Okay, so again, if this is the key, what do you know? I start by saying, let's assume that Pharaoh isn't an idiot. Does this seem like a move? What do you make of this plan?
It reminds me of Thucydides and the Spartans, and they had this slave population that kept on being a problem whenever outside forces would attack.
Yeah. Now, look,
so it seems like it depends on how many outside neighbors are like that powerful, and he seems to be on the defensive.
Look, we know that Egypt had many outside neighbors who were powerful, both in Africa and in Mesopotamia. But the point is, like you say, with Sparta and the Helots, or the Americans and the black slave population in the South, this is true. You know, that when you when you enslave people, you give them an incentive to rebel and support your enemies in wartime. To rebel or support your enemies in wartime. Okay, but we've never. In all the history of slavery, as far as I know, we don't know of any slave society that decides to therefore eliminate the male slave population because of this. Because again, the purpose of slavery is the benefit of slavery is the hard labor that slaves perform. Eliminating the males eliminates the bulk of that hard labor. Okay, so you might as well liberate them. Okay, it requires less work than killing them all and maintaining it, and you eliminate the source of your fear, this fifth column. But again, you're basically eliminating the whole benefit of having slaves. Okay, so
except for the women would be different. So if you liberated them, they'd probably take their wives and their children with them, whereas if you killed all the males, the women would be left.
Right. So I think. Not the inkling of an explanation that's offered in verse 10 again, doesn't make sense. Of course, it could just be that Pharaoh is hateful and is willing to, what is it, cut his nose to spite his face? Is that how you say it?
Mhm.
But like I said, it's not super important, but it doesn't make sense. And I think the more plausible theory then is the intermarriage theory. Okay, that this way, that you're concerned about them as a political entity, and if you remove the men, then the women will marry with people, Egyptians or others, outside the Israelite group, and so they'll still produce children, but it won't. But the ethnic group or the political group, Hebrews or Israelites, will dissolve. Okay. Okay, so little Moses is saved from this cruel fate by his mother and sister, and by Pharaoh's daughter, who gives him an Egyptian name. So Moshe, in Hebrew, Moses is Moshe, and his name is tied to an Egyptian name, Masheh, which is the middle part of Ramses. Ramses is Ra'amashesha in Egypt. And so this is obviously an Egyptian name. But so he has an Egyptian name, but he also has a Hebrew name, or a Hebrew language explanation for the name, and that is Moshe, because I, Pharaoh's daughter, Mashiti, pulled him from the water. So again, you can see in the name that he's got the Egyptian identity and the Israelite identity, and he grows up as in the palace as an Egyptian aristocrat. So what's the function of Moses in 10 to 15 of Moses killing the Egyptian slave driver? What does the author want you to learn from this? Wait, this isn't 1 to 15. 10 to 15. This is...
Yeah.
Where is it? Oh, okay. It's chapter 2, 10 to 15. 11 to 15. Yeah.
So he's still. It's strange because Moses, as a small child, before he knew anything about anything, and maybe before he had memories, was put into this, put into the Nile and then taken out, and then the rest of his life he knows as an Egyptian, but he identifies the Hebrews as his kinfolk.
Right. So obviously, somehow he knows. Maybe his mother told him, his adoptive mother told him, or it wasn't a secret. Maybe other people told him. Maybe the Pharaoh's daughter's entourage, or okay. So somehow, we don't know how, but he knows that he's an Israelite. Okay, and we're told that that's why he kills the Egyptian. Okay, we get the explanation in verse 11, where it says he went out to his brothers. Okay, so it's not simply that he's a great humanitarian, and he's triggered to action by cruelty, by witnessing cruelty. Okay, it's cruelty towards a fellow Israelite that gets him to act. Okay, so that's one thing. So we know that. So the author means to tell us that despite growing up in the palace as the son of an Egyptian princess, Moses knew that he was an Israelite rather than an Egyptian. Okay, he felt solidarity or kinship with those slaves. Okay, so that's that's news to us. Okay, that even though he dresses and speaks and looks like an Egyptian, he knows the truth of his origin. And you can see this because when after this murder, or when it becomes known, he flees to Midian. This is in Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. So he arrives at Jethro. When he meets Jethro's daughters at the well, they come home and tell their father that an Egyptian man helped them. Okay, so when people see him, by his dress, by his speech, by whatever else, they see an Egyptian. Okay, but when he sees himself, he sees an Israelite. Okay, so that's one thing that that the author wants you to know, obviously. What else? Like what else do you now know about Moses, thanks to this? Again, just this little episode from verse 11 to 16, let's say. You see there in verse where is it? 19. An Egyptian man saved us.
Mm-hmm.
See?
An Egyptian. Yep.
So, but again, before he gets to Midian, but by the way, how does how is Midian? Just I've seen it spelled in so many different ways. How is it spelled in your Bible? Like in verse 15, for example, where he sat in the land of Midian.
Midian.
Oh, okay. Midian. Okay. So go back to the question. Verse 11 to 15. What is it? What do you know now? What's the author telling you?
His taste is not for cruelty. He doesn't like what the Egyptian was doing to the Hebrews, and I don't know. It seems to me also that he could have been identifying with the Egyptian, and it occurring to him that that's not okay. You should not be doing that.
Yeah, but
as well as identifying with the Hebrew.
Yeah. So look, and what do you mean? How is he identifying with the Egyptian though?
That this kind of conduct is not okay.
Oh, like unbefitting of
yeah, unbefitting of
yeah. So okay, so perhaps he has this kind of again the position of an educated or kind of removed from the harsh realities of life, like many people who grow up in palaces. But with regard to his relationship to his Israelite kinfolk, what again, other than the fact that he acknowledges himself as one of them, what else comes through here?
He became frightened because the matter was known that he apparently didn't know that that other people knew that he was an Israelite.
Right. No, I don't think that he is concerned. I don't think he's concerned about being known to being an Israelite, because look, when he in verse 13 sees the two Israelites fighting, and the guy tells them, one of the Israelites tells him, "Who put you to be? Who do you think you are? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Okay, so he's not concerned And Moses was afraid that the thing was known. He's not afraid that it's known that he's an Israelite. He's afraid that it's known that he killed someone. Because in verse 12, the author tells us that before killing the guy, the Egyptian, he turned right and left and saw that there was no man, that there were no witnesses, and then he hit the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. Okay, so we're told this was not an impulsive act. You know, that you see, it was deliberate. This is a deliberate killing or murder. Okay, it's not murder too. It's not in the heat of passion or moral outrage. Okay, it's murder one. It's premeditated. He knows it's wrong. He makes sure that nobody's watching, that he can do it without getting caught. So he knows that he's doing something illegal. And in this respect, you can go further. You know, why kill the Egyptian? Look, he's a prince or an aristocrat. Okay, why not tell the Egyptian to stop using his authority and status in the palace? Like, why doesn't he? Especially if you say that this is befitting of a great civilization like the Egyptian to act this way. Why not tell the Egyptian, hey, stop doing that? I'll tell my mother.
Guess the answer would be that he wanted to kill him, and he wanted to get away with it.
Yeah, look, look, he wants to do the right thing and protect his brothers, okay, his fellow Israelites. Okay? But what this looking right and left, making sure that nobody's watching, and then when it becomes clear that people were watching, running away, clarify, he's not a leader. Okay? He doesn't have he doesn't see himself as a leader to these people. Okay, he wants to do the right thing and protect these people because he feels a connection to them, but he does not want to live with the consequences of showing this kind of anti-Egyptian solidarity with the Hebrew slaves. Okay, so he does not want to publicly choose the Jew side and declare himself as with them, as their protector, and therefore as an enemy to Egypt. Okay, that's why he can't tell the Egyptian slave driver to stop, because that will have a cost. That's a public act with consequences.
If he pulls rank, he will alienate the Israelites because he will identify himself as an Egyptian.
Oh, no. If he pulls rank on the Egyptian slave driver, he will upset or he'll earn the enmity of the Egyptians. Okay, because he will show that he sides, he supports the Israelites. He wants to protect the Israelite slaves rather than pursue Egypt's interests. Okay, so he can't tell the Egyptian guy to stop because that will have a cost. Okay, if he wants to continue his life,
wouldn't it?
Go ahead.
If that were in the calculation, then why kill him? Like, because that just exposes you. If that's where the threat is.
No, but it does. If you look, every person who murders hopes to get away with it. Obviously, okay. That's why you make sure that you murder in a closed room at night with a mask, put on gloves so as not to leave fingerprints. Okay, so every murderer wants to do what he thinks is the right thing. Okay, let's say you're having an affair, and the woman you're having an affair with is threatening to destroy your marriage. You want to protect your marriage, but but you don't want to get caught. Okay, so you want to do the quote unquote right thing. In this case, protecting your marriage by murdering someone, but you want to continue with your life. You don't want to pay the cost of the murder. Okay, so in this case, if he wants to continue his life as an Egyptian prince or as an Egyptian aristocrat, he cannot publicly come out against Egypt in favor of the Jews. Therefore, he can't verbalize to the Egyptian, hey, stop it. Don't hurt my brothers. Okay, because that's a public act. By contrast, murder in secret, which he thought he was doing it in secret, murder is not a public. This murder is not a public act. Okay, so so if he wants to continue his life as an Egyptian aristocrat, he has to either look the other way, pretend that it doesn't bother him, or he has to kill the man in secret and hide his body so that nobody would know that he sided with the Israelites against the Egyptians.
Isn't that second one, that second alternative is not rational, it's indulgent in a passion?
How so?
Because the rational, I suppose, if he's rationally acting for his own preservation or for his own status or to live the life that he has lived, the rational choice would be not to put that at risk. Whereas he is putting it at risk by even attempting the murder.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, he feels, it seems to me, that, look, the author, it's important for the author to tell you that this was not a public act. He wasn't coming out and saying, these are my brothers, this is wrong, stop it, and act for the liberation of his fellow Israelites. Okay? He was doing it in secret. Okay? And and you're right. Okay? If you really are that concerned about maintaining your life, your lifestyle, then look the other way. Okay? But he doesn't want to, or maybe he can't. Okay? Again, if he thinks of them as family, again, think of you. Okay? Then there's this pull, these competing forces. On the one hand, my heart goes out to my brothers who are being abused this way. On the other hand, I don't want to lose the lifestyle I've become accustomed to. Okay, so he wants to do the right thing by his brothers, but he doesn't want to give up his palace life. And therefore, he doesn't tell the Egyptian, he doesn't publicly side or publicly lead the Israelites. He tries to help this. It's kind of like the difference between when you go past a bum on the street, whether you give him $1, kind of a small act to do what you think is the right thing, versus leading a campaign to end homelessness and da-da-da-da. Okay? So he doesn't want to lead a campaign for the Jews. He doesn't want to side publicly with the Jews, but he still wants to do the right thing by these Jews. And therefore he makes the calculation, like all murderers do, that he can get away with murder. That he can do something and keep it private. And in most cases you find out that that's not the case. So the point is that, again, in terms of what you see here is a reluctant leader, or somebody who's not a leader. He doesn't want to be a leader. Okay, he feels that he's one of these Hebrews, but he doesn't want to share their lot. He doesn't want to be among them. Okay, he isn't interested in leading them or saving them or being in the trenches enslaved with them. Okay? He wants to keep his past life, but he also wants to, again, just live up to his responsibility, his ethnic responsibility, and as a fellow Israelite. Okay. So where else does the author clarify that Moses is not interested in leading his fellow Israelites.
Well, after this, he takes off.
Right. Okay. So that's
And
that's the
sticking
first
around.
thing. Okay. He's not throwing his lot. Now that it's public knowledge, he's not throwing his lot in with these slaves. He runs away. Okay. What else though?
I guess I don't know. The Pharaoh that he would have the most influence with, that like he knew personally, he waited till he. It wasn't until after he died that he came back. I don't know if he was going to ever be able to use his influence with, I don't know, the court or
Yeah.
what have you, to help the Hebrews, but he definitely never does.
Right. Yeah. And again, so he could have stayed, again, at a tremendous risk to himself, because we know that that Pharaoh heard this and wanted to kill Moses. Okay, but so he didn't use his influence. He didn't stay to throw his lot, one way or the other, with the Israelites. But
I guess he goes to Midian and then he
and then
takes
what?
a wife that's not an Israelite.
Right. Okay. Yeah, but look, that is not necessarily. Look, a lot of the as long as you're not marrying a Canaanite, like we've seen and will see, Israelites marrying foreign women, and they simply become part of their family and adopt the family religion. But it is true that in Midian, he flees again across the desert to Arabia, and doesn't concern himself with what he's left with what's left behind with those Israelites, with his people back in Egypt. Okay, he creates a new life for himself, has children, and he's fine. Okay, he doesn't concern himself with what's going on back in Egypt to his brothers and sisters. It's only God who forces him to go back. Okay, and that's the other part, the other indication, that the author gives us, that Moses is not a leader, is a reluctant leader. Because again, the author tells us explicitly at the burning bush, with that endless exchange, that back and forth with God. Okay, God tells him, go save the Jews and lead them, go be their leader, their savior, and Moses repeatedly and exhaustingly for us readers tries to convince God that he's not the man for the job. Okay, he gives him this excuse and this excuse and this excuse. Okay, and he's afraid. Okay, and he's, even though God, he says again this reason, that reason, and God responds, but he's never convinced. Moses is never convinced by God's responses to him. Okay. Eventually he does it, because in 4 look in 14, no 15.
God concedes that let Aaron speak for you.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, in 14, yeah. And God was angry at Moses and told him, with Aaron will speak for you, and he will help you, and you spoke to him, da, da, da. Okay, so eventually Moses agrees to do it, not because he's convinced by God's responses to his various excuses or arguments, but because God has had enough of trying to convince Moses with logic and with assurances and with miracles. He simply gets angry at Moses and tells him, "You shall do this," and Moses does it. Okay, so he doesn't. it's not an impulse within him, and even it's an impulse within God that Moses becomes a leader. And even in response to God's initiative, Moses doesn't want to. And he does it only when God has had it up to here with him and told him, go do it. Okay, so the author, and actually, look, there's another clear sign that's revealed to us inadvertently in this really odd scene. If you look at 424, okay, where numerous people have tried to explain what this is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So my translation is, at a night encampment on the way, the Lord encountered him and sought to kill him. So Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his leg with it, saying, "You are truly a bridegroom of blood to me."
Right. And then God, and then apparently God let go of him. So God was trying to kill him, but after she conducts some sort of magic, some sort of healing magic, God left. The disease or whatever it is that struck Moses departs. Okay, so again, we're not going to dwell on this. Okay, well, actually, before we get to that, so there's this bizarre episode where he becomes sick, or God tries to kill him explicitly for some reason. Who knows what this whole episode is? But inadvertently, we're told that, well, actually, so just in this one or two verse that you just read, what shocking thing did you just find out about Moses, the greatest leader in Jewish history?
He was not circumcised.
Well, not he. Well, later on we'll find that he's not either. Actually, I'm not sure. But his son definitely, he didn't circumcise his sons. Okay? So again, we're not going to try to understand this crazy scene with this magic trick or this magic ceremony or whatever it is she did there. And not because it's not interesting, but simply because if you just stick to the pshat, to the written text, then all of us acknowledge that we don't understand this episode. Okay, and maybe there's some magic here that ancient readers understood or recognized, but we don't, and it's just lost. And so all these explanations using creative readings, might be true, but might be complete baloney. But in any case, so people have tried to explain it in a variety of other ways, other than reading the simple text, using kind of a more allegorical reading or symbolic reading or mystical reading of the, let's call it the drush. But as we're reading the text, we're just reading the text as it is, because we're trying to understand the author rather than read creatively, to be co-authors. So the one thing that we can understand in this scene is that Moses' son was not circumcised. Okay? Now, there's a question about whether the Jews were circumcised when they were in Egypt, because later on there'll be a later generation will be circumcised in the desert. So it is an open question, I think. But it very well might be that they did circumcise, through the generations. And the thing about this, when you find out, if that's the case, and we know now that Moses did not circumcise his sons, that he left Egypt, left his people, went to Midian, never looked back, created a life for himself there in Arabia, and didn't circumcise his sons, that again tells us something about Moses' position, about his relationship to his people. Because it's very hard to get kicked out of the club of Judaism. Okay, you can disregard the various rules and restrictions. You can eat pork on the Sabbath. You can eat cheeseburgers. You can not go to synagogue once in your life. You can be an atheist. You can marry a Christian girl. You can be an anti-Semite. You can be an anti-Zionist. You can give millions to BDS campaigns. You can know nothing about Jewish history or the Jewish language or culture, and none of these will make you see yourself as not Jewish, or make other Jews see you as not one of the club, one of their own. There are only two things that can do that, that can clarify to you and to others that you are no longer a Jew, that you're outside the group. And that is worshipping foreign gods, okay, like for example becoming a follower of Jesus Christ or Muhammad or Buddha or whatever. That's one thing. And the second is, so again, you can be an atheist, but you're still a Jew. But if you're a Christian, that's it. You're no longer a Jew. If you follow Christ, you're no longer a Jew. So that's one thing. And the other thing is not circumcising your sons. Okay, those are the only two things that I can think of that is a divorce bill from Jewry. Okay, Jews look the other way on virtually anything, but with these two acts, again, worshiping foreign gods and or not circumcising your sons, you declare yourself as divorcing yourself from us, and we in turn recognize that you're no longer one of us. Okay. And so I think what you see from the moment Moses is given his name to this scene here, you can see that Moses had identity issues. Okay, he grew up Egyptian but felt a kinship to the Jews. But when he flees, he marries into the family of a Midianite priest and is obviously fine with leaving both his Egyptian and Jewish pasts behind. And the author makes a point to tell us repeatedly in various ways that Moses is a reluctant leader, that he's not strong, he's not a heroic figure that comes to save the Jews. He tells us all the time in all these instances that Moses does not want this assignment and that God compelled him. Okay, so and it's such a repeated element in the story that it can't be an accident. It's part of the character construction of Moses. Okay, so what's the what moves the author to do this?
Well, it seems reflecting on a few things that you wrote. There's another distinction is that there's no sibling rivalry. There's no like, I want to be this next piece in the history, leading the history of this people between him and his brother. Whereas before that, there was rivalry throughout.
That's true too, yeah.
And Moses is also the first to be raised by foreigners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, but what if this and I think it's clear that it is part of the character construction of this character. Okay, that endless conversation at the burning bush just hits you over the head. He doesn't want to do this. he's not the man for the job. He doesn't want to do it. And we've already seen inklings of it in the killing of the Egyptian, and the fleeing, and the creation, and starting a new family, and just divorcing himself from everything that happened in the past, not circumcising his sons, etc. Okay? But the burning bush makes it clear that this is not just us reading into the text, into the Egyptians, into the murder scene, or into the Midian scene, or whatever else. The author hits us over the head with this, that Moses does not want to do it. Okay, he's a reluctant reluctant leader. Why is it so important for the author to do this?
It does set Moses apart from all the other founders.
It what?
It sets him apart from all the other patriarchs. He's it seems like Abraham, at the end of the day, when he's promised the covenant that he's promised, wants to go through with it, even without miracles.
Yeah.
Moses did miracles. He
Yeah.
still doesn't want to do it.
Yeah. Right. So why? Why? Look, you're right that we don't get this with the patriarchs or Joseph. Excuse me. Why would the author want to why is it important, which obviously it is, for the author to clarify that Moses is not a born leader, not a strong, heroic champion of the Israelites? That he's a reluctant hero. What's forget the Bible for a second. What's a reluctant hero meant to accomplish in literature? Like, what's the what numerous movies or novels with reluctant heroes. Okay, what's it meant to accomplish for the author or the director?
That fates go in a certain way regardless of the particular desires of individuals. Like, things are put in motion.
Yeah, so you're right. It could be a comment about fate, okay, or about that someone else is in charge. Okay, do you need to take that?
Real quick.
Yeah. So a reluctant hero in literature or movies or whatever this feature of the hero, this characterization of the hero, could be there to highlight the hero's humility. Okay? Or it could be the author's or the director's effort to clarify that the purported hero is not really the hero, but somebody else is the real mover behind what's happening, behind the development of the plot. Okay? So, and I think look, when you talk about fate, I think that's part of that. That's, in this case, it's not a character, unless it's the gods. If you're talking about Greek drama, that fate isn't really fate; it's the will of the gods. They're the ones who are driving the plot. It's not Odysseus or whomever. So, if indeed, so look, it could be simply to clarify how down to earth Moses is, that he doesn't think that it's his position that who am I? But if the purpose is to highlight the other hero or the other character in this drama, which in this case is God, it's because I think this is what's going on here. Okay? That it's important for the biblical author to clarify that Moses is not a hero. Moses is not a willing leader. Because the author is aware that Moses very much looks the part. Okay, he looks like he is the hero of the story in the salvation of the Jews. Okay, he's heroic, he's manly, he's a strong leader with everything he's going to do here from now on. He's a strong and wise ruler. He's a wise lawgiver. Okay, by all accounts, he is the hero of the story. He is the savior. Okay? And this was never a problem. If you think, why the previous patriarch or the patriarchs, why it wasn't important to clarify that they're not the hero, God is the hero, because none of us ever this was never a problem with our previous characters. Abraham, Isaac, Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Okay, because first there were not national leaders of anyone, simply because there was no nation. But on top of that, they were not particularly inspirational. Okay, they were not particularly strong or impressive or admirable or likable. Again, Abraham, you're not drawn to him. He's not charismatic to us. We don't get inspired by him the way we do by Moses or by David. Isaac, of course not. Jacob, pretty slippery character. Joseph is just unlikable. Okay, so there was no need to, there was no contest up until now between who is the real hero, the person or God. Okay, it was clear, we weren't that impressed or drawn to the human characters. Okay, I think we talked about why they're so unimpressive, these patriarchs. Okay, here we have a character who is impressive. Okay, and we need to remember in this context that that the Bible's audience of adults and children, they already knew the name Moses before they knew how to read, or before they ever heard kind of their first campfire telling of the Exodus. Okay, when they first heard the story of the Exodus told around the campfire, or at Passover, or whatever, it was not the first time they had heard the legend of the great Moses. Okay, Moses is the superstar of Jewish history. Okay, so everyone who read this text or heard this text knew his name. Just like, look, you didn't need to get to the first grade to take first grade American history to know the name George Washington. Okay, you knew his name before you even took your first history class. Okay, and they were the same way. They knew him, just like you knew George Washington, as the savior who took them, or took their people, from slavery to freedom and to the promised land. Okay, the person who gave them their religion at Mount Sinai. So those ancient Jewish readers in, let's say, the 10th or 8th or 9th or 8th centuries BC didn't arrive to this text as blank slates. Okay, they already had an image of this legendary hero long before they heard the story. Okay, so we should consider that the author is addressing an image that his audience already knew, or thought they knew about this man. Okay, the author, again, it doesn't matter if the author is God or if the author is a human author, but this author is clarifying that no, Moses is not the savior. Moses is not the initiator of the Jews' salvation. Moses is merely a messenger. His title is Shaliach, a messenger of God. Okay, God sent Moses. God pushed Moses. God forced Moses to do it. Okay? God did it. God was the savior. God was the general. God was the lawgiver. Okay? And this is clarified by the fact that Moses repeatedly did not want to throw his lot in with the Israelites. Okay? God made him go back to Egypt. Moses ran from Egypt to save himself from punishment. God sent him back against his will. Okay? And in fact, if you look at chapter 4, verse verse 19. Okay, what does the author tell you with this little tidbit?
He doesn't need to be scared anymore.
Right,
The people who wanted to kill him are dead.
But see, look, the previous verse says he goes to Jethro and tells them, I'm going to go and return to my brothers in Egypt and see if they're still alive. And Jethro tells him, fine, go in peace. And God tells Moses, after Moses says, I'm going to go, God tells Moses, go return to Egypt, because all the people who want to kill you are dead, have died. And then Moses goes. Moses then, in verse 20, then Moses takes his wife and their sons and the donkey, and they go back to Egypt. So Moses agreed, okay, I'm going to go. But he's not going. Okay? God has to tell him, Moses is still not throwing his lot in with these slaves. He's still concerned about his safety, above the fate of his Israelite brothers and sisters. Okay? And God has to assure him personally that he won't face punishment for that murder he had committed so many years ago. Okay, so again, Moses is not going, okay, which again clarifies that God is the Israelites' savior, and Moses is merely a tool, a puppet, and an unwilling tool at that, in God's hand. Okay? And you'll see this again. It's to me it's a consistent theme, like a super consistent theme, which clearly which clarifies that it addresses a problem with the heroism of Moses. Okay? If you look at when the Ten Commandments make their appearance, if you look at 20 verse 1, 20. Yeah. Okay. So again, we have this image of Moses as this Jewish Solon. Is that how you pronounce it? Solon?
Solon, yeah.
Solon. The great lawgiver. Okay. And the biblical author clarifies here before the Ten Commandments are listed for us. The author clarifies that God is the one who authored them. Okay, God said all these things to say, again, and then the Ten Commandments are listed. Okay, so the author clarifies that God is the one who gave the Jews their supreme laws, not Moses. And then I don't know if you, well, in any case, there's a second version of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 6 to 18. 5. Yeah. Okay, so the Ten Commandments are listed twice. once in Exodus and once in Deuteronomy, chapter 5, 6 to 18. So, again, so check out what comes right before them and right after them in Deuteronomy. Okay, so the Ten Commandments are listed in verses 6 to 18. Look at verses 5 and 19.
So I stood between the Lord and you at the time to convey the Lord's word to you, for you were afraid of the fire and did not go up to the mountain, saying. And then in 19 I have the Lord's.
And then it starts. So again, Deuteronomy is Moses' farewell speech to the people before he goes off and dies. Okay, so he says, "I stood between God and you to tell you God's word, because you were afraid and didn't go up the mountain." Okay, and then he tells them God's word, lists the Ten Commandments, and then in 19.
And I have the Lord spoke these words, those and no more, to your whole congregation mountain with a mighty voice,
right,
and out of the fire and dense clouds.
Okay, so I told you God's words, Ten Commandments. And then the Ten Commandments are over, and Moses says, these are the words that God said. Okay? And so again, yet another repetition of the fact that it's not Moses. Moses is not the lawgiver. God is the lawgiver. Moses is not the hero. God is the hero. Unless you think I'm making too much of this, if you go online after this and read the Passover Haggadah, this is the kind of the book that you read during the Passover meal that tells the story of the Exodus. This was the Haggadah was written in the 3rd or 4th century A.D. Okay, and it simply retells the story of the Exodus. And the amazing thing about this book, that again, the Passover Seder, the Passover meal, is a ritual history lesson that all Jews tell themselves about the foundation. They tell the origin story of the Jewish people, the Exodus from Egypt, and you'll be amazed when you read it cover to cover that Moses does not appear as a character even once in the Haggadah. Okay? God is the protagonist. Okay? God is the direct leader of the Jews. He's the savior. He's the lawgiver. Okay? Moses' name is mentioned only once, and that is when the Haggadah says that, and the people believed in God and in his servant Moses. That's the only time Moses is mentioned in the Haggadah. Okay, so I think it clarifies that the biblical author, and then later on the Haggadah's author, is combating this perception that Moses saved us. Moses, wise Moses gave us these laws. Moses led us in battle. And they want to clarify, because Moses is not like Abraham or Isaac or Jacob or Joseph. Okay, he really is an inspirational, impressive leader, and there's a threat that he might overshadow God. Maybe not a threat, maybe there's evidence that people think of Moses this way, and therefore the author clarifies. He's not the man. Okay, God is the man. Okay, so I want to skip over the interaction between Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh, not because it's skippable, but because it's so important and so loaded that it'll take us a full session to go over that interaction and the 10 plagues. So we'll do that next week. And the reason why it's so loaded is that we're told repeatedly in that section of the story during the 10 plagues that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and that's why Pharaoh was so intransigent. Okay? And then God punishes Pharaoh for his intransigence. Okay, so it seems like a pretty serious problem involving whether we have free will and are morally responsible for our actions, number one. And it also looks like the Bible completely ignores that it's a problem. Okay, it presents this thing of, God hardens his heart, which is already, I didn't know he could do this. And then he punishes him for having a hard heart. And then it doesn't treat it as a problem. It doesn't solve this problem for us. So, in any case, so we'll investigate both problems tomorrow, next week. So, let's skip past the 10 plagues, past the Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea, past the miracles in the desert, and just look at the 10 Commandments. And again, we'll go back in time to the 10 plagues in the Exodus from Egypt next week. So, before we discuss individual commandments, I want to discuss their groupings. So if you look at the 10 Commandments are in chapter 20. Chapter 20, verses 2 to, 14? Yeah, 15. No, 14.
Yep.
So the first 4 commandments are, so if you look at how they're grouped, the first 4 commandments are what Israelites owe God. The last 5 are what Israelites owe the community. Okay, their fellow man and woman. Okay. And then there's the 5th commandment. Okay. Honoring your father and mother. So, which of these groups does the 5th commandment belong to? Okay, is it, do we have here a 5-5 split, or do we have a 4-6 split?
It seems like a 4-6, just because father and mother seem to be community.
Father and mother seems to be what?
Community. The first inklings that we have about our responsibility to our community come from our father and mother.
Yeah. Well, and they're human beings. Obviously, they're like, just like you owe X to your neighbor, not to covet your neighbor's wife or whatever else, and not to murder him, and not to steal from him, and your parents, are obviously part of your community, part of the society. What's the look? Take a look at all 10 commandments. Again, just kind of read quickly in your mind. Just kind of skim all 10 of them. Again, verses 2 to 14, and disregard the content. Just read them stylistically. Again, with a literary eye. So again, forget the content, because what you just said about the parents being part of the society, and therefore part of the obligations to the society, that's based on content. Okay, murder, theft, sleeping, fornication, not fornication, adultery. These are things that involve the society, and you include your mother and father in that. But if you forget the content and just look stylistically at the commandment, do you see a 5-5 symmetrical split, or again, do you see a 4-6 split?
That seems to be more of a 5-5.
How so?
It seems to be more of a 5-5 just because think the last five are strict, like don't do these things. And the first five, there are things that you shouldn't do, but it's for God.
Right. Well, look,
And honor thy father and mother is not a don't
yeah,
do.
but no, but look, but that's already looking at the content.
No.
Okay, for God, yeah, that's the meaning of the word. But just again, just stylistically, or just look at the sentences themselves, at the verses, at the what do you identify the diff? Because look, you're obviously right. Stylistically, you have here a 5-5 split. Okay, what makes it clear that it's five? Again, stylistically speaking, that it's 5-5. What are the first five have in common that they don't have in common with the last five, or vice versa? What do the last five look like that is so different from the first five? Look,
That you shall not, you shall not, you shall not.
Yeah, but look, but the first, I mean, the second commandment also has, "You shall not make, worship foreign gods." Okay, you shall not make a statue or an image. Okay, so the shall not.
They're shorter though. They're like more succinct, and you
Right.
shall not do this, you shall not do this, you shall not do this. There's
Right.
no explanation.
Great. Both things. Okay. The last five are super short and direct. Okay. No murder, no adultery, no stealing, no false testimony, no coveting. Done. Okay. You have 5 commandments in 2 verses. Okay. The last 5 read like rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Okay, like a machine gun. Whereas the first 5 are very long. The last 5 are packed in 2 verses. The first 5 are written over the course of 11 verses. And each of the first commandments, each of the first 5, contains an explanation. And again, it doesn't matter now the content. But clearly, each of the first 5 commandments says either an explanation or reasoning or consequences. Okay, don't worship other gods because something. Don't take the Lord's name in vain because this. Keep the Sabbath because that. Honor thy parents so that X or Y will happen. Okay, that does not happen with the last 5. Okay, so stylistically, it's obvious that you have this symmetry here, 5 and 5. Okay, the first 5 are presented as a unit, the last 5 are presented as a unit, both in terms of providing an explanation for the first 5 and not the second 5, and again the prose style of the first versus the last. The last are just a list. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So, and it also stands to reason that before you even heard anything, if you hear that there are 10 somethings on 2 tablets, you assume a 5-5 split, and then you see it in literary form. Okay, with the different look of the 5 and the fact that these have explanation and these don't. And so it raises this question with the 5th commandment of, why is it with the first 5 and not the second 5? It seems, based on content, that it's one of the social commandments, not the divine commandment, the directed towards society, not directed towards God, or duties towards. And so it raises the question of whether honoring your parents is the suggestion here that honoring your parents is part of your duty towards God, rather than your duty towards society. Okay. So it seems that the author is calling on us to contemplate this question. Okay? He's showing us that the Ten Commandments were split between two tablets, and then that's reinforced by the literary style of the first and last five. And so look, if he's calling on us to contemplate why honoring our parents is a duty towards God rather than towards society, then let's contemplate it. Okay. I called your in the email I sent you. I called your attention to the fact that the commandments command the Israelites to not do this and that, but only two of them command them to do something. Okay, and that is sanctify the Sabbath and honor their parents. Okay, those are the only positive, do commandments. What is there a significance there? Why are the commandments mostly prohibitions?
I guess if they're being said verbally in a group of people who are leading families or whatever, telling them what they need to not do, that they may be inclined to do.
Right, but look, if you're obviously telling these people to do and not do very important things, whatever they are, why are there so many don't do this commandments and so few do this commandments? Like what is it? What's the significance? What are the what explains this?
I suppose the do command or the don't commandments narrow the path but don't give you any direction. But the do commandments give you direction towards something, I suppose, as opposed to
I don't see why. I mean, why? I mean, don't covet your neighbor's wife.
But that doesn't tell you what to. If you're going to go towards something, as opposed to just stay stationary, it doesn't tell you where to go toward.
Okay, yeah. So it tells you what to stay away from. It doesn't tell you what to embrace. The Sabbath, your parents. Okay, I can see that. But okay, but why then? Okay, so why do we need that many stop signs and only two of these go signs?
So the direction. So it seems like honor thy father and mother would point back toward the original covenant with Abraham, would point toward tradition, genealogy, your father and your father is honoring their father and their father's father and their father.
Yeah, look, I don't know. Look, what you're suggesting is a historic kind of encouraging a historical.
So I have in my mind it's if there's generational strife, it has to do with doing something new or being beholden to something old. Honoring thy father and mother is being beholden to something old.
Yeah.
Or encouraging that. I don't know. The Sabbath is.
But then the question then is about the Sabbath. How is that? See, look. Again, forget the Ten Commandments for a second. If you give your children rules to live by in your house. And of the 10 rules, or 20 rules, or however many you post on the fridge, the do's and don'ts of this family, 90% of them are don'ts, and only 10% of them are do's. What does it indicate about your understanding of your children?
They're wild.
Well,
A little
they're
unruly.
yes, I don't know if they're wild and unruly, but um,
There's a lot of things.
they're innately rotten, okay? And you're trying to, against their nature, give them a moral education, okay? But by nature, they will hit their brother and steal from the cookie jar and lie and cheat and harass the cat, etc., etc. If you don't teach them otherwise, they'll do all these terrible things. Okay? And that's why you need all these stop signs. Okay? Don't do it. Like, you want to do that? Don't do it. You want to do that? Don't do it. Okay? So I think what you see here in the construction of the commandments, or the nature of the commandments, is a general reflection of the Bible's consistent understanding of human nature as rotten. Okay, and if you take a look back at Genesis 6, verse 5. Here, I'll find it. Genesis
wicked,
6.
Men's ways are wicked, right?
Yeah.
Where it's how great man's wickedness on earth, and how every plan devised by him.
Every thought in his heart is only evil all day. And then, so God understands this, finally, here. And then again in 8 verse 20, 21.
So never again will I doom the earth because of man, since the devisings of man's mind are evil from his youth, nor I ever again destroy every living being as I have done.
Yeah. Okay. So God, God understood over time that man's heart is wicked. Okay, all the time. And that is the Bible's general understanding, or the Old Testament's general understanding throughout. Okay? So if you have a heart, if you, the human being, including the Israelites, have a heart full of ugly impulses and desires, then what you're most of need of is a set of prohibitions. Again, stop signs, to stop you from doing these terrible things that you want to do, or that your wicked heart is impelling you to do. Okay? So all the commandments address an ugly trait that we humans have innately. Okay? We're naturally ignorant of God. We're naturally idol worshippers. We're naturally liars. That's the 3rd and 9th commandments. We're naturally murderous and violent. We're naturally adulterous and thieving and deceitful and covetous. Okay, so all the commandments address some sort of ugly trait in human beings. Okay, so our natural and ugly impulse to do terrible things explains the don't commandments. The commandments that give us a stop sign and says, don't do that. Again, just like the rules on the fridge. Okay? Which means that the 2 do commandments reflect an ugly habit that we have of not doing something. Okay, again, think of those few do commandments that you will write for your kids on the fridge. Okay? They address something that, say thank you and please. Okay? because you've been living with your kids and you know they don't say, they're like savages. They don't say thank you and they don't say please. Okay? And so you say, when somebody gives you something, say thank you. When you're asking someone for something, say please. Okay? So those are do commandments based on your observation that your kids fail to do something. Okay? So if that is the case, again, we see that is the case with the don't commandments. If that's the case also, if the two do commandments address a habit that we have of not doing something important, what is that ugly habit? Again, if when we don't remember the Sabbath and don't honor our parents, what is it that we're not doing?
We're disregarding tradition. Or
I don't know. Look, honoring your parents is not tradition. I mean, look, you can. Your parents could have brought you up in the church and taught you how to do A, B, and C, and you can leave the church and develop a whole new different way of life and still call them every week and not interrupt them when they talk, and everything else we do when we honor people. Okay, so it's not necessarily keeping to their traditions, but honoring them. Okay, so like again, if you think of Jews who don't keep the Sabbath, or people who don't honor their parents, what are they failing to do? What are they doing that's bad, or not doing that's good?
They're distracted by their own desire. When you brought it up that way, I picture someone working and forgetting about their parents and working through the Sabbath because I have something that I'm focused on that I want, and disregarding.
Yeah, but look, the working I get about the Sabbath, but that doesn't apply to the parents. People who don't honor their parents, it's not because they're too busy at work. It's that they don't honor their parents.
So
a lot of bums who are not kind of hard at work, are not workaholics or have a strong work ethic, kind of dishonor their parents or disregard their parents.
So would disregarding or dishonoring your parents be doing things that they told you not to do, or would that be doing things that actively hurt them?
Well, okay, look. The plain reading of the text is showing honor to your parents, showing respect to your parents. You might interpret that as not doing something that will hurt their feelings, or not doing something that they would disapprove of. Look, that's a broader reading of the term. Just like, look, when it says remember the Sabbath, what it means, based on the text, is don't do work, and don't make the members of your household, including the animals, work on the Sabbath. Now, you could read remembering the Sabbath in a broader way, that you should contemplate God or do a variety of things, but all it says is don't work. Okay? And this
So it'd be generosity then? Be generous with your parents and be generous with the people in your household?
Yeah, I don't think it's like with the Sabbath. It's definitely not generosity. It's not a commandment that's geared towards the members of your household. It's geared towards God. Okay, look, when we don't remember the Sabbath, when we don't keep the Sabbath, and when we don't honor our parents, we're showing ingratitude to God with the Sabbath, and to our parents for everything they've done for us. Okay, so and And ingratitude, if we said that stealing and lying and adultery and idolatry and murder, etc., or violence, are innate and natural impulse in the human heart, okay, so is ingratitude. Again, like I said, you have to teach your kids to say thank you. Okay, so we are born ungrateful, and we stay ungrateful unless our parents hound us and beat it into us to show gratitude. Again, say thank you, say please, say thank you again, say thank you, say thank you. How many family reunions have you had where you had to repeat this endlessly? And so parents hound their kids to show gratitude in the hope that one day they might actually feel gratitude. Okay, that it won't be a performance, but a real sentiment. Okay, and we see it in our own lives, just like we saw it with Cain, and we'll see it with Job, that people tend to focus on what we didn't get or what's been taken away from us, rather than being grateful for what we do get or what we did get. Okay, and the point is that this is not only unattractive, but again, if you look at how the Bible sees it, it's not simply unattractive socially, but it's destructive, as you saw with Cain. Okay, it's destructive to others, but also destructive to you, to not feel gratitude. So these two, the Sabbath and your parents, are gratitude commandments. Okay, just like the murder commandment addresses your innate violence, and the infidelity, the what's the word?
Covet.
Adultery. The adultery commandment addresses your licentious impulse. The gratitude commandments address your ungrateful, your impulse or tendency towards lack of gratitude. Okay, lack of gratitude towards God and lack of gratitude towards our parents. So, to go back to the question about this 5-5 symmetry. Okay, if indeed the stylistic symmetry, 10 commandments on 2 tablets, long, short, with explanation, without explanation. If this stylistic division suggests that we have a 5-5 split, then why is honoring our parents a duty to God?
It would have to be something to be grateful or show gratitude to parents, or recognize that one ought to be grateful for parents. The next step would be that one ought to be grateful for the creator of everything, perhaps.
But why is there a connection between God and your parents?
Your parents create you, and God creates everything to create. They're the source of all creation.
Well, and that God created. Yeah, the most obvious suggestion about this question is that the 2 gratitude commandments are joint because the 2 creators are joint. Okay, your parents are God's agents or vehicle in creating you and sustaining you and providing for you and educating you in the path that God wants for you. Or actually forget that, but just in creating you, keeping you alive, sustaining you, giving to you, etc., etc. Okay, so we owe everything to both of them. Okay, God created us as a species and gave us everything we have, the earth and all of its abundance. And our parents likewise created us and gave us everything we have. Okay, not just your mother's milk and shelter at birth, but the clothes on your back, the food that made you grow, protection that kept you from being enslaved or kidnapped or killed or abused, your name, your identity, your family, whatever wisdom and experience you have, your profession, the spouse that they find for you in that society. Okay, so basically you owe these two entities, God and your parents, everything you have. But you're conditioned by your crummy nature to not see it, to be blind, to focus on what you don't have than on everything that you do have. To focus on what the flood took from you, or the drought, or the disease took from you, rather than all the abundance of the earth and everything that you do have. To focus on what your parents didn't do, or not even to think about your parents. Okay, so again, I think what you have here is a recognition that God and your parents are joint in producing you and giving everything to you, and that we're naturally not dismissive, but that we're not cognizant of it, and therefore somebody has to tell you to show gratitude, okay, with a do commandment rather than don't commandments. But I want to go back to what you were saying about honoring your parents, about what it means to honor your parents. Okay, so I mean, how? Well, yeah, just because all it says is honor your parents. It doesn't explain how you're going to do it. Okay, so what does that mean? Honoring your parents. Actually, forget, not theoretically. How do you honor your parents? You, David, that is.
Regularly speak to them, regularly take or inform them, keep them up to date of life decisions and take their input into account.
Right.
And they're a regular part of your everyday life, I suppose.
Yeah,
maybe not every day.
Yeah, I don't know if they're necessarily part of your life, especially if you think of America, where we're kind of.
But in your thoughts, I don't. That might be a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
That their voice is kind of there.
Yeah, but look, you're absolutely right. You show them deference. Again, you call them. You maintain a relationship. You pursue the relationship with them, rather than letting them, kind of forgetting them and just responding to their calls. Okay, it's your duty to pursue a relationship with them. You show them consideration. You seek their advice, or you take their input. Whether you follow it or not is a different thing, but you treat them as if their advice, as if their input matters to you. But also, look, you behave differently when they're in the room than when they're not in the room. Okay? When they're not in the room, you might have a foul mouth. But when your parents are in the room, you don't cuss in their presence. Okay? You mind their dignity in a way that you don't mind the dignity of other people. You protect their honor in their absence. If someone talks smack about your parents, it's different than when somebody talks smack about your friend. Okay, you protect them, their honor, their dignity when they're not there. You don't interrupt them. Again, at a family dinner, if your brother is speaking, you might interject. But if your father is speaking or your mother is speaking, you'll let them finish. Okay, you give them the best seat at the table. You obviously you take care of them when they're frail. So all these things that you mentioned and I added here are all of them relate to actual conduct. Okay, to like how you treat them or what you do. Okay, they relate to your actions, not your heart. Okay, so you can feel, and you know, many of us do, feel resentment towards your parents or disappointment in your parents. You can feel it in your heart. Okay, you might not feel love for them because again, love is. If you look at different cultures and how people feel about their parents, you know, the standards of affectionate relations is different. Okay? But the point is that even if you feel resentment or disappointment, or if you have anger towards them, or if you just don't have that kind of affectionate sentiment towards them, you owe them the list that we just went through. You do this, you don't do that, you don't interrupt them, you seat them at the head of the table, etc. Even if you have something in your heart against them, or feel some sort of distance in your heart from them, you owe them honor through your conduct, okay, through your actions. Okay, so you cannot compel your heart to feel what it doesn't feel. Okay? But you can compel your body or your mouth or your limbs to act respectfully towards these two people. Okay? And this is something that so again, the honoring that your parents, it might we can pour all sorts of meaning beyond showing respect into these words, into to explain what honoring your parents mean, and you can get from that to, again, not leaving their way of life, or not leaving the village even, maybe. But I think a simple reading, the most minimal reading of honoring your parents is showing them honor, dignity, etc. with your actions. And the same approach goes for all the commandments. Okay, the commandments towards God and towards society. That what you see here in these 10 commandments is that God's demands are in the realm of actions, not intentions. Okay, none of these relate to the heart or the mind or your faith. Okay, they relate to your actions. Okay? With the only exception being the 10th commandment about coveting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through the commandments one by one, and we'll get to this issue of the 10th commandment being a commandment of the heart, which is out of character. Okay.
Give me 1 second. I just got to check one thing.
So you can see here in this list of 10 rules of conduct, of personal conduct, and in the other 600 rules in the Torah, that in Judaism, it's actions that matter. Okay? And it might be related to what we discussed with Abraham, that only when Abraham lifted the dagger to Isaac, only then did God know what's in Abraham's heart. Okay, so it's God's demands here in the 10 Commandments have to do with our acts, and not so much with our hearts. Or if it has to do with the heart, it's that The workings of the heart are manifested in the actions, and therefore the actions are what matters. Okay, so let's go through the Ten Commandments. Any questions that we kind of skipped over so far?
No, man.
Okay. So when we discussed Adam, Eve, Cain, and Lamech, we were talking about why it is that humans are bad from birth. Okay, why is it that man's heart is innately evil and focused on bad, etc., etc.? And it seems clear that it's because we have reason. Okay? If I'm cold and I want your coat, or if I'm hungry and I want your sandwich, or if I want your wife or your house, reason dictates that I take it from you by force. I mean, I have need X, and I can address that need by taking it from someone who has it. Okay. Okay. So you identify a problem and identify a solution, and there you have it. Now, ever since God learned what He learned about human nature from Cain, from Lamech, everything we read up until Noah, ever since then, God has been working on us. He's trying to provide us with a moral education to teach us what reason cannot teach us. Okay? And it started with the 2 new laws that God gave Noah after the flood. Okay, where He changed the diet and changed the ruling on capital punishment. Okay, you remember that, right?
Hmm?
Yeah. And so that combination of carnivorous diet and capital punishment for murder drove home God's moral instruction that we are not, in fact, animals. Okay? And that human life is precious. It's unlike animal life. Okay? And that moral education continues here with the Ten Commandments. Okay, so again, let's just go see one by one and see what education they offer. And obviously, some are obvious, so we don't need to. We can race through them, but but others are less obvious. Okay. So, where is it? 20.
I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, house of bondage.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm your God, I liberated you. Okay? I, the God of the universe, cared about you and reached down to save you and make you free. Okay? First commandment. Pretty obvious. And the second commandment, no gods but me, is the implication of that. Okay? I'm God, I liberated you, I cared about you to take you, to make you free, therefore, don't cheat on me. Okay? I am your God, and you, the Israelites, are my people. Okay, this is an exclusive relationship. I won't betray you, don't betray me. I'm a jealous God, I punish those who flee from me and defy me, and I reward those who stick with me and follow my commandments. Okay. And then the big, one of the biggest problems in the Ten Commandments, and that's the third commandment.
So my translation is, you shall not make for yourself a sculpted image or any likeness of what is in the heavens above.
No, that's the second commandment. The third commandment is
you shall not bow down to them. Or
no. Third commandment
shall not swear false.
Not taking the Lord's name in vain. Okay, so the first commandment, again, this is how Jews count it. Did I email you about this, that Jews count I am your God as the first commandment? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the first commandment is I'm your God. Okay. The second commandment is no gods before me. Verse 3, 4, 5,
Mm, okay, I
6.
see.
Okay? So 3 to 6 is the second commandment. Okay? Don't have other
Okay.
gods. And then an explanation. Don't make a statue or a picture. Don't do this. Don't bow to them. Don't worship them, because I'm your God. I'm a jealous God who punishes those who hate me. And I reward those who uh, love me and keep my commandments. Okay, so that's the second commandment. The third commandment is do not take the Lord's name in vain. Okay? Now, there's only one commandment about which God says that He will not forgive those who violate it. It's not murder, it's not foreign worship, it's not bearing false witness. It's this, it's taking the Lord's name in vain. Okay? So, what is taking the Lord's name in vain?
So my translation has it, you shall not swear falsely by my name.
Okay, what does that mean?
Um, invoke the name of God in a covenant and then break the covenant kind of thing.
Wait,
In, invoke invoke the name of God in an agreement and then break the agreement, or invoke the name of God in any
yeah,
agreement.
yeah. So look, it's a question. Look, it's not obvious what this is. The most common interpretation of this, and the reason why we don't call God by His given name, whenever we see the letters JHVH, we say God or Lord, is that we interpret the third commandment as this idea that God's name is holy, too holy to be spoken by us, and therefore don't say it. Okay? But I think, as your translator suggests, and again, it's I think the most common understanding of this commandment, and it explains again why we don't call God by His name. But if that's indeed the meaning of taking the Lord's name, then there are two problems. Okay? First, we need to accept that that saying the holy name out loud, JHVH, is the worst sin in the book of sins. Okay? More grievous than paganism and idolatry, more than murder, more than desecrating the Sabbath. Okay? And it just doesn't make common sense. Okay? The idea that this is worse than all these other things, it's silly. Okay? But we've already established that many things don't make sense to us, but they make sense to God. Okay, so maybe this is one of those things. Okay, there are a lot of things that God requires of us that we don't understand. But the second problem, okay, so you can address this problem. This is the worst thing, that this is the one unforgivable sin. But the second problem is the in vain part of the commandment. Okay, if it's a holy name that should not ever be spoken, then why is it okay to speak the name when it's not in vain? Okay, because the prohibition is only speaking, taking the Lord's name in vain. Okay, so it's okay to take the Lord's name when it's not in vain, but taking the Lord's name when it is in vain is the worst sin in the history of sins. Okay, so again, we're back at square one as to what it means to take the Lord's name, and these two things: what is to take the Lord's name, and what is in vain. Okay, so what your translator is suggesting is that it's swearing an oath with God's name and then breaking the oath.
Mm-hmm.
So when you don't mean to. Why would that be so? So that definitely solves the problem of the in vain. Okay, where you're not meaning to keep your word, but you're swearing by God that you will. But why is it such an egregious sin? And again, obviously, it's wrong, but more wrong than murder, more wrong than idolatry.
It would seem, this is a hypothesis, I suppose, or one suggestion, that if the law is the building blocks of a community, a political community cannot function if you take your most sacred oath and are able to break it willy-nilly. Like, people can't get along.
Yeah,
There's no,
yeah. Although the problem with that is that this interpretation puts this commandment in the second five as duties towards society, not duties towards God. You know. Yeah. So like,
and then the,
go ahead.
that it would somehow denigrate that which is sacred by using it in everyday dealings, isn't it?
Yeah, so look, it brings up the question of what is taking God's name, because what you're suggesting in either explanation is that it's an oath about your dealings with people. Um, so look, the when you think of taking or carrying a name, you know, taking somebody's name, or the Hebrew can be either taking or carrying. I don't see the big difference between the two. So what does it mean when you take my name or when you carry my name? You know, when a wife takes her husband's name, it's it's not that she says his name. Okay, so when a wife takes her husband's name, what does she do with that name?
Uh, she's identifying herself as a part of, or
Part of his family.
entity, yeah, part
Yeah.
of his family.
Right. Okay. So when she takes his name, she now represents his family. Okay. She is now a member. She becomes a member of his family, and she represents that family to the world. Okay. She represents the family whose name she just took. Okay. Her actions now reflect on the family whose name she carries as her last name. Okay. And it's this way in, you know, again, taking a name or carrying a name. It's that way in Hebrew and in English equally. Again, taking your name. I suspect that's the same in other languages. Okay. Or think, so a marriage is one instance where you take somebody's name. Or think of a commander or a diplomat, excuse me, who carries the king's seal, okay, or carries the king's authority. Okay, so again, the emperor is back at Rome, but the commander in the field, the dukes, the representative of the emperor, is acting in the name of the emperor. Okay? He represents the emperor or the king on location. Okay, so again, so taking the name, taking your name, whether I'm your wife or whether I'm your subordinate, okay, means that I am your emissary. I represent you and your name. Okay, whatever I do in your name. Okay? So, given that, and again, this is how taking a name functions in Hebrew. I know it functions the same way in English. I'm assuming it's a common usage of taking somebody's name or carrying somebody's name authority. So if that is the case, then what does this commandment say? What does it prohibit?
From Israelites acting ungodly or not representing
No, but look,
God's chosen.
if they're not keeping the Sabbath, or if they're uh, worshipping idols, they're not acting in a godly way, but they're not taking the Lord's name in vain. Okay, so again, if taking the Lord's name is, I'm sorry, they're not taking the Lord's name. Okay? If taking the Lord's name is like a general carrying the king's seal, or a wife carrying her husband's name, his family name, what is this commandment designed to prevent, to prohibit? What are you not supposed to do? Like if you take God's name, what are you doing?
Is it making, well, under the, it'd be speaking on behalf of God.
Right, exactly. Okay, so again, Moses speaks in God's name. Moses takes God's name all the time. Okay. But he really is God's representative. He really is his prophet or his emissary. Okay? What this commandment is about is false prophets. Okay? Taking the Lord's name in vain, like doing what Moses did, but for a purpose that is not Moses is an honest, presents himself honestly as God's representative. So he's taking God's name not in vain, but he is like that general who represents the emperor. But if you do it in vain, that is the unforgivable crime. God will not forgive those who falsely present themselves as representatives or messengers of God. Okay? And now it makes sense. Why is it that this is such a grave offense? Why is this the gravest offense of all the 10 Commandments? The only one that God will never forgive.
Because it would undermine everything.
Meaning what? What's so bad about? Why is this worse than murder or worse than idolatry? Why are false prophets worse than any other creature in the world? Murderers, adulterers, etc.
Because God speaks through a prophet, not directly. And thus, if there's false prophets that would undermine the connection between God and people in a way that would make the people lose all confidence in the biblical God.
Right. Well, it's not that it won't make them lose confidence in God. It would,
or in any prophet.
It would lead them. No, because they don't know that you're a false prophet. Okay.
Isn't the measure of a false prophet if things don't pan out the way that they said they would?
No, because it tells you, I forget where, that even if they perform miracles and prove that they are, they do the impossible. Again, they make a miracle happen. If they lead you away from God's law, then they're a false prophet, despite evidence. Even if they have evidence on their side. So the point about false prophets is they commit 3 crimes. First, they defame God. Okay, they lie about God. Okay, they tell you that God wants you to, do X when in fact God wants you to do Y. Okay. So they tarnish God's reputation by attaching His name. They take His name and attach it to things that God actually opposes. Things that are not true, things that are not good, things that are not godly. And they attach God's name to these things that God opposes. Okay. Second, they steal from God. Okay. They take God's name and His moral authority and use it without permission for their own purposes, to do whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. And third, Okay, so um, they mischaracterize God, they steal from God, God's authority, the authority of His name. And third, by guiding godly people away from God, guiding people who think they're following a prophet into doing things that God opposes, the false prophet not only encourages good and godly people so they encourage, again, they not only misrepresent God or defame God and steal from God, they do real damage to good people, because these good people, these godly people, are led to doing evil and to oppose God's true will. Okay, and that is why this is the worst crime imaginable. Okay, and because again, it's always a big question as to why is this, which seems like the least of the commandments. Okay, whether it's the not saying God's name, or as you say, not swearing a contract on a contract with God's name. Okay, I mean, this happens all the time. This God won't forgive, but He'll forgive murder, forgive idolatry. But if you take it this way, you see how this commandment contains so many crimes against God and against people, that it becomes comprehensible why it is so unforgivable.
And it's specifically the false prophet who invokes the name of the God of Israel.
Yeah. Okay, so it's and look, the false prophet it's a very serious problem in any monotheistic religion. Okay, and it's a problem that every one of the major monotheistic religions had to deal with, and it's a spiritual problem, but it's also a practical problem, because many of these false prophets, seemingly, again, they perform miracles, they show that they're the real thing, they're inspirational, and you have this contest between the religious authorities and the inspirational prophet. Okay, and it's kind of like that scene in Spider-Man, with the two Spider-Mans, and who's the real one, and each one is pointing at the other, so they kill him, he's the imposter. Okay? How can you tell? And it's hard to tell who's the false prophet when God isn't speaking to us directly, He's speaking through people. Okay, so it's a real problem that goes to the heart of a religion like this. And the damage can be so great to God and to the people. And that's why it's elevated to such... this offense is elevated so much. Okay, the fourth commandment is the Sabbath. Okay. Now in Deuteronomy, again in Moses' farewell address to the Israelites, he recites their Exodus story to the congregation, and that includes a recitation of the Ten Commandments, okay, what we read earlier. Now the Ten Commandments in Moses' speech in Deuteronomy chapter 5 are not carbon copies of the ones we read today in Exodus 20. But the differences are minor. Okay, a word here, a word there, a reasoning here or there. For example, in the Ten Commandments, you're told not only in Deuteronomy, you're told not only to not covet your neighbor's wife, but also not to lust for her. Okay, is that a meaningful addition, alteration of the Ten Commandment of the 10th commandment? You can make a mountain or a molehill out of this. It could be merely stylistic, or it could be made into something significant. In the fifth commandment, honoring your parents, the Deuteronomy version tells you that this will result in you enjoying a good life, whereas in Exodus, the Exodus version says that this will result in you having a long life. Okay, so again, I'm not sure if this is a meaningful distinction, because a long life is often used as a feature or an indication of a good life. Okay, it's true in the Bible, and it's true today. When we wish people a long life, what we mean is a good life. Okay, these are what do you call it? Like the circles that overlap. In any case, these are parallel.
The Venn diagram.
Yeah, it's like a Venn diagram. So in any case, so these are the kinds of differences between the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy and in Exodus. And some commentators find these minor differences meaningful, and others see them as minor or merely stylistic. But the one commandment in which the differences are not minor or stylistic is the Sabbath. Okay, because here the differences between Exodus and Deuteronomy are not a word or two, but whole in multiple sentences. And the two versions say completely different things. Okay? At Mount Sinai, in Exodus, we're told to observe the Sabbath because it is a holy day, because it commemorates God's creation of the world. Okay? We show gratitude to God by treating it as a holy day, by not toiling, by not working as we do on normal days. Okay? So that's the explanation for why we're doing this. What the meaning of the Sabbath is. But in Deuteronomy, in Moses' speech, Jews are told to observe the Sabbath not because it's holy, not to remember that God created this bountiful world, but to remember that they were slaves in Egypt and that God liberated them. Okay, so here we're told that it's to commemorate the act of creation, and here and there in Deuteronomy, that it's to commemorate the Exodus. What God did for us there. So, what is the difference in terms of the Sabbath? Keeping the Sabbath. What's in either version? What's the meaning of the Sabbath if it's to remember creation, and what's the meaning of the Sabbath if it's to remember slavery? Because look, both of them involve gratitude to God. Okay, but what is the difference? What does it matter if it's to commemorate, to remember X versus remembering Y?
In the first one, it would be remembering God for power in making everything. Whereas in the second, it's a specific act, like He did us out, like He liberated us from this terrible circumstance. So we owe a very specific debt, or something along those lines. It's much more specific.
Yeah. So if it's to remember creation, then it's pretty self-explanatory. Then the purpose of keeping the Sabbath is to honor and thank God, and to contemplate God. Everything that to make Jews remember the Sabbath, and thereby, basically, God tells Jews to remember the Sabbath, and the Sabbath in turn makes the Jews remember God. Okay, that's if it's to commemorate creation. Okay, but if the Sabbath's purpose is to, or if if the Sabbath is meant for resting, as a reminder that you were a slave in Egypt, then then it could be simply it could be like the first version. That okay, so you should be grateful to God not because He created the world, but because He saved you, He liberated you. Okay. So again, it's still thank you to God, but like you said, for a more specific act done to us Jews, rather than the general thanks to God that we humans owe. In which case, there's not in the second explanation, it's more national rather than general humanity. But the purpose is still gratitude to God for what He did for us.
I guess the alternative is you're not slaves anymore, so you can rest.
Not that you can rest.
Or that you have to rest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It could be again. So if it's what you said earlier, this is a national thank in Deuteronomy. It's a national thank you rather than a human thank you, or it's a more specific. I'm expressing gratitude towards a specific act you did for me, rather than the general stuff you did for me. Hey, stop. Sorry, the dog. But it might be it might be that the first one is gratitude to God, and the second one, what is said in Deuteronomy, the version in Deuteronomy, might suggest that the purpose of the Sabbath is to have a day, to have one day a week in which you are compelled to practice, to act out your liberation. Okay? This day does not belong to your employer, or if you're a slave, does not belong to your master. Okay? Because slaves, by definition, do not have a day off. Their lives are work. Okay? But Jews are commanded to have a day in which they act out their liberty. You stop laboring and you rest. And you enjoy peace and leisure and family and friends and whatever. Okay? So certainly it should inspire gratitude to God, who did liberate you. But the primary function is not gratitude to God, but instead it's to force you to practice liberty, okay? To make you enjoy your liberty, and therefore make you treasure it and be grateful for it. And so again, it's a question. What we're trying to make sense of is, if this is the original, obviously the Exodus version of the Ten Commandments is the original, and the second is Moses's retelling of it. Okay? So we're trying to understand again, all those minor changes in the other commandments could be dismissed as minor and not meaningful. This cannot. Okay? This is a real difference. And it explains the Sabbath completely differently, and therefore we need to try to speculate as to what the difference signifies. Okay? And so the point is, if it is indeed to force us to act out liberty, the question is, why do we need to be compelled? Okay, I mean, why don't people want to be free? I mean, don't people want to rest rather than work all the time?
Seems like other wants can somehow overcome us to where we put everything into X, Y, or Z, and it's not hard not to forget about rest.
And what would, if it's Moses? Okay, this is Moses
Hmm.
reciting. What would make Moses, at the end of his journey, think that the people need to be compelled to act out their liberty? Again, it's not like they worked the fields obsessively. They were in the desert, just marching.
There used to being, I guess there's been a generation maybe was brought up in the desert, but there used to being slaves.
Where do you see this? I mean, you're right, but why do you say this? That they're used to being slaves?
Um,
And how does Abraham know that that is the case? And not Abraham, Moses.
um, I dig it. Before they go on their 40-year, they have those confrontations.
In which they say,
Uh,
repeatedly they complain that what? Against Moses.
that they're not, that they're not worthy, or
No,
that that,
quite the contrary. No,
that they can't see God, or they can't. I guess at first but they get when push comes to shove, they don't want to go up the mountain. They don't want to.
right, well, throughout the journey, repeatedly, they complain, why did you take us out of Egypt?
Oh,
Okay, you took us out of Egypt to die here in the desert. Let us go back to Egypt where at least we had food, or at least we had water, where we weren't going to be killed by these Amalekites or whatever. Repeatedly, okay, they long for their days in Egypt and curse their existence in the desert. They yearn for the security and food that they had in Egypt, even if it was meager under slavery. Then the dangers and the hunger and the thirst, etc.,
uncertainty.
as a free people in the desert. Okay, so look, people don't yearn for liberty. Okay, they yearn for food and water and shelter and warmth in the winter and protection against violent people. Okay, and we know from history that people give up their liberty every day in exchange for these necessities of life. And Moses knew it better than all of us because his people confronted him all the time and lamented that he forced them out of slavery. You know, they yearn back. They yearn for those days of slavery. Okay. So, and again, so it's something that Moses was aware of from his journey with these people, and that we're aware of from human history. Okay, this is why Thomas Jefferson famously said that, or observed, that the natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and government to gain ground. And James Monroe likewise pointed out that people were unable in all ages of history and in all countries to give up their dearest rights and privileges as if they were impelled by an irresistible fate of despotism. So perhaps Moses, given his experience of leading these people for 40 years, maybe what he was doing in Deuteronomy, in the fourth command, in the version of the fourth commandment in Deuteronomy, maybe he was adding his own insight about these slavish people who repeatedly complained about the hardships of liberty in the desert, and explained or expressed nostalgia for the food and safety that they had in Egypt as slaves. So Moses or maybe God, learned, if we take Moses' rendition in Deuteronomy as, again, that he's a mouthpiece for God. That Moses or God learned during those years in the desert exactly what Jefferson was talking about. Okay, basically what we can see this this rendition of the fourth commandment as a concern by God and Moses that look, we didn't liberate the Jews just to see them slide back into servitude again later on in pursuit of food, shelter, protection, etc. And so perhaps this second rendition has Moses or God trying to devise a way to make the Jews fall in love with their freedom. Okay, to make the Jews become habituated to their freedom and to learn to treasure it and to resist the normal human impulse to trade freedom for food and shelter and warmth and protection. Okay, because like we said earlier, after Cain and Lamech, that God put humanity on a re-education program with the two new laws he gave Noah, the carnivorous diet and the capital punishment, in order to force people to understand that we're not animals and that human life is precious. It's a constant struggle throughout history, because the human tendency is to see ourselves as animals and to behave like animals and to treat other people like animals and to treat animals like people. Okay? But at the same time, the fact that we eat animals and we punish murderers, the fact that we were given this law, that, hey, we eat animals and we punish murderers with death, these habits of ours, so even though it's a natural impulse to see ourselves as animals and to behave like animals and to treat people like animals, the fact that we at the same time eat animals and practice capital punishment pushes us in the other direction, against this natural tendency to behave like animals and treat people like animals. Okay, so these social practices, capital punishment and carnivorous diet, it shapes the mind about the kind of this hierarchy between people and animals, not through the mind, but through the stomach or through the body. Okay, it's not intellectual; it's just impressed upon you. Okay, and so perhaps the Sabbath is likewise a similar kind of educational program to push the Jews in the direction of liberty against their natural tendency to trade liberty for servitude. And if that's the case, then we might have an explanation as to why this commandment is the only one in which we see a big difference, a profound difference between the text in Exodus and the text in Deuteronomy. Because of what happened between Mount Sinai and Moses' farewell address. Okay, because God and Moses saw that these people were not lovers of freedom. Okay, and therefore, based on the 40 years in the desert, based on these years between Mount Sinai and Deuteronomy, they saw the need to condition the Israelites to value liberty more than they did. Okay, we've already covered the fifth commandment with the parents, so let's skip to the murdering. Actually, it's 6:40. Do you have another 10 minutes, or do you want me to just email? Yeah?
Yeah, I got another 2 minutes.
Okay. So, murder, we all, I hope, understand what is so heinous about murder. Okay? We discussed this when we talked about Cain and Lamech and the new laws to Noah. Okay, so we're not animals, and it is a crime against us and against God to treat people like animals and to kill them like animals. So that's one thing. One offense that's involved in murder. Okay, it's an offense against God and it's an offense against humanity. Okay, and the second is that it's offense against this person who's being murdered because it's the most extreme form of theft. And if you saw Unforgiven, that Clint Eastwood movie where he says it's a hell of a thing killing a man, did you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you take everything, you take from him all he's got and all he's ever gonna have. Okay, and so you steal everything from him, and you steal from his family. You steal everything that this person contributes to his family, from wages to protection to love, companionship, guidance in life, and everything else. Okay, so it's a crime against God, crime against humanity, and a terrible crime against really complete theft from that person and his family. But so again, so the commandment is pretty obvious, but I want to clarify a translation problem with this commandment in many translations. You know, the majority of translations, ancient and modern, Greek, Latin, English, and others, have it as "Thou shalt not murder." Okay, but the King James translation has it as "Thou shalt not kill." So it's only a few translations that translate it as "Thou shalt not kill," but it just so happens that the most popular translation, the most popular English translation, mistranslates it like that as "Thou shalt not kill." Okay, so again, the difference is obvious between kill and murder. Okay, murder applies to humans only. Okay, you can kill dogs and birds and cockroaches, but you cannot murder cockroaches and dogs. Humans can be either murdered if it's illegal or immoral, or they can be killed if it's done justly or legally or in war or by accident. Okay. So the result of the King James translation is that in the English-speaking world, we have this bizarre commandment, the sixth commandment, in which God tells the Jews to be pacifists and vegetarians, and not killing living things, not killing humans in war, not killing humans in self-defense, not killing people in executions. Even though God Himself, in the same Torah, repeatedly demands animal sacrifices and capital punishment and war. Okay, so it's a unique kind of problem resulting from the popularity of the King James Bible that many people walk away with this idea that God expects us to be pacifists and vegetarians. Okay, bearing false witness. Okay, we're going to skip theft and adultery since I think it's clear why it's so morally wrong and societally destructive to steal and to break up the family, which is the basic building block of a society and of safety and stability and prosperity and justice. So, bearing false witness. Okay. In the Hebrew, it clearly refers to giving false testimony in trial. Okay, it says again in the Hebrew, do not give false testimony. Okay, it's not. It doesn't seem to be a commandment against lying. Okay, because and so sometimes it's taken as a commandment against lying. Okay, even though the language the language is legal, suggests a court of law. Okay, and it makes sense because lying outside of a courtroom is sometimes wrong and sometimes it's right. Okay? It depends on the circumstances. Okay? But lying in a courtroom, why is lying in a courtroom? So we can all understand why at times lying is a good act. Okay? If your wife asks you if you think she's gained weight, you know how that ends. But why is lying as an eyewitness in court such a heinous act? Well, why is it? It cannot be, unlike a normal lie outside the courtroom.
It can have devastating consequences for another person, or I guess yourself.
I didn't hear the beginning. What?
It can have devastating consequences. It can hurt people. But I suppose if you're giving false testimony for yourself or to help the loved one,
or to help who?
Or to help a loved one. I suppose you could give false testimony in court to help someone that you want to help.
Well, but again, you're helping one plaintiff against the other. Okay, so
Right.
again, obviously you're helping. We always try to help. The same is true of murder. Okay, you're trying to help somebody that you love by getting rid of somebody that you don't know or don't love. But again, so lying outside of a court to do good, we can easily understand circumstances that would explain that would justify lying outside of a court. But why is lying in a court never, or why is it such a grave offense against society? Here we're dealing with the commandments that list our duties towards society. In a way that we can never justify it. Unlike lying outside the courtroom, which we can justify, why can we never justify lying in a court?
I suppose in a court, the stakes are always going to be, it's always going to hurt somebody. And the stakes are to get.
Yeah, but that might be true also outside the court. Okay, that your lie is going to help someone and hurt someone. But why is it so much worse inside a court?
I guess I have to say, inside the court, the stakes are different, or at least the community says the stakes are different because you're breaking the law, or the law's at play.
That's true. Obviously, you're breaking the law, but in a way that you're not when you're just lying in the street. But why is it so grave?
Do you swear an oath? It's breaking an oath. I suppose you can swear an oath. Sorry, 1 second.
So the point about lying in court is that, of course, you're cheating somebody out of what is rightfully his or hers. Okay, but more than that, okay, which is already a crime. You're stealing from someone. You're cheating someone against justice. But you also make the courts illegitimate in the eyes of the community. Okay, which makes which makes people avoid the court system and administer justice themselves. Okay, by force, through the clan system. Okay, so the law of the courts is at war with the law of the strong. And if you diminish faith in the courts by making trials, show trials, then you encourage people to revert to the original way of handling disputes. So beyond this or that case, beyond this or that theft. Okay, so the last one was the problem I mentioned earlier about coveting. Coveting is at the heart of all crimes listed in commandments 6 through 9, the short ones, the social ones. Okay, murder, adultery, theft, false testimony. Okay, and maybe even the first three commandments. It's the impulse of the heart that triggers all those crimes that one commits with one's physical body. Okay, but but how can you not covet? Okay, yeah, isn't it involuntary for the heart to want what it wants? At which point it's up to the mind to just restrain the body from acting on that impulse or that desire. Okay, so again, this, like I said earlier, this is the only commandment that commands not one's actions, but one's heart or mind. Okay. Virtually all the laws given to the Jews in the Torah, in 613 in number, virtually all of them, are do's and don'ts, not feels and don't feels, or thinks and don't thinks. Okay, so what kind of commandment is it even possible to stop the heart from coveting, to train your heart to not covet?
I suppose you have to covet in the first place in order to recognize it as coveting and then to stop it.
That's true.
Actually, but
okay.
it does.
Actually,
it does,
okay.
like,
go ahead. Sorry.
The thou shalt not covet, as soon as you do covet, would trigger you to course correct, I suppose. You took the commandment seriously. But
yeah. So I agree. I agreed when you said it, but then I was thinking, look, most of us avoid lusting after our fathers and mothers, no matter how handsome your father is or how hot your mother is. The vast majority of people don't covet, don't lust for them. Okay, so it's not that they lust for them and then they tell themselves not to. Okay, but there's some sort of mechanism that makes you disregard how hot your mother is, and you don't want her that way. Okay, so it's not necessarily that you do covet and then course correct. Okay, so it suggests that if the taboo is against coveting is strong enough, then in fact it can train you from childhood not to resist your desire, but to not desire in the first place. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just trying to think.
Okay, so look, it would be great if the taboo against desiring what is not yours, somebody else's wife or property or livestock, was as strong as the taboo against incest. But since that's not the case, can you train yourself? Is it possible to feel this lust, this covetous desire for your neighbor's wife, and then drive it out of your heart?
I don't know if to drive it out of your. It's possible not to act on it. That seems pretty clear, but to drive it completely from you.
Yeah.
How much control or not? How much control do you have over that?
Yeah. Look,
once it's there.
It seems like what you said earlier. Okay, that in order to not covet, you have to resist something that already happened. Okay, that's already there. And look, it's a problem in Jewish law, in what's called halakha, Jewish religious law, as to how you police this commandment. Okay, like you know, when can it be said that somebody committed this sin? Um, and through all the Talmudic debates about what is the offense and what is the point in which you've transgressed against it, against this commandment, it's been determined that a man can be judged as having violated this commandment only by actually acting to obtain the object of his desire. Okay, it's the act. Okay, now so the rabbis all acknowledge that the commandment, the 10th commandment prohibits the desire itself, but only the action is proof that the man has failed to conquer and eliminate his covetousness. Okay, so just like again with Abraham, only Abraham's action was proof of his devotion and submission to God. Okay, so what matters is the manifestation of what's going on here. Okay, what matters in Judaism is the action. Okay, so even though the commandment is about the heart, the administering of it or the judging of it is done only by the actions. Okay, so last observation about the last 5 commandments is that, again, they don't tell us, they're just don't do this, there's no explanation. You know, it doesn't explain why not murder, why not steal, why not commit adultery. Just don't do it. Okay? Whereas each of the first 5 commandments explains why we should comply. Okay? Each of the first 5 commandments include a reason or a consequence. Okay? Okay, so the commandments detailing our duties towards God explain themselves, and the ones detailing our duties towards our fellow man do not explain themselves. Why do you think this is so? I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of asking you to speculate. Us to speculate.
The whole, perhaps they're more self-explanatory. Those are all things that we wouldn't want other people to do unto us. So it's like the whole do unto others as you would have them do unto you seem to be like in there somewhere, except for the, well, I guess even the covenant.
Yeah, the coveting is, yeah, the coveting is odd because again, it's not a don't do, it's don't feel, which is an odd one. It stands out in general. But look, it might be self-explanatory for social beings. Again, so a child might not know because he hasn't been habituated to our culture, or an alien. Okay, but the people who receive these laws, are social creatures. They've been living in a certain culture, in a certain legal culture. Okay, so maybe they don't require explanation because murder and theft and adultery and false testimony were already punishable crimes in virtually every organized society of the ancient Near East. Okay, so these are not new things. Okay, and they're self-explanatory because we've all been living in a society where these things are already illegal. Everybody knows it's illegal. Okay, but by contrast, the first 5 commandments, you know, the Israelites' obligations to this monotheistic God were brand new and bizarre. Okay, they stood in contrast to the world that they all grew up in and understood. Okay, so again, that's pure speculation. I have no idea why these commandments don't explain themselves and these do, but it does seem, it stands to reason that you would have to explain things that are novelties and you don't have to explain things that are common practice. I guess maybe you can think about it and email me if you have any other ideas to explain the disparity. All right.
Do we
It's been.
do we know Egyptian because they were in Egypt? Or were they common Egyptian laws too, or the last file? I imagine they were.
I don't know specifically about Egypt, but elsewhere in the Near East they were. Like if you look at the laws of Hammurabi, etc., you find them elsewhere. Yeah. Again, minus the coveting.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a long session.
Thanks again for everything.
Oh, you're
So
welcome.
next time we're gonna be going through, still sticking with 1 through 20.
So next time, yeah. So I'll send you an article. So yeah. So we're basically covering stuff we've already read. I'll send you an article about kind of moral responsibility, since that's what we're dealing here with. Who's morally responsible for Pharaoh's actions? Is it Pharaoh or is it God? So I'll send you so again, no new readings in the Bible, but I'll send you this article that I kind of highlights this tension between scientific knowledge and moral knowledge on this issue.
No, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, good night and welcome.
Right, thanks
home.
again for everything. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. See you next week.
See you next week.
Yeah. Bye bye.